A gentleman approached me back in '96 with an idea of a project such as this, and he put up a Met tower, they call them, for to measure the wind speed and see if such a project was feasible for this area. This is the first wind farm in New York State. It does give me some additional income. It's one more crop, so to speak. It does assist me in paying the taxes and some of the bills, and it's just one more thing to help in an economy that is real tough for agriculture right now. Well, it's been totally accepted. We've been very fortunate here. Some of the other communities around that they're trying to put them in have met with some resistance, but we were very fortunate here. The community was behind us 100%.
Well, I think the critical issue is one that we really can't do much about, which is this is a very visible technology. I also think on the positive side that it's great to have an energy technology that the main concern is the way it looks. There are so many concerns related to other parts of our energy system, the pollution that's created, the mining that goes on, the transportation, a whole range of issues that we largely avoid.
If today's wind turbines have become robust, efficient power generators, one would think they would be everywhere, producing clean energy for expanded economic growth, but this is hardly the case. As it turns out, the very size of these machines becomes an issue. An informal group of families gather in upstate New York to explain their concerns about a proposed wind farm in their community.
This is not your small backyard wind turbine. Again, these are large-scale projects. They're industrial in nature. There's nothing like them in the area that I can
they're
think of.
not adorable little windmills that people think of when you say wind turbine. They think windmill. You're not surrounded by tulips and look wonderful. These are big structures that impact everyone.
They're like a 40-story skyscraper. They're 400 feet tall with a blade extension.
I think anytime you do a large-scale energy project, you're going to have impacts on the ecology and on the environment. And we're aware of some influences, and we try to minimize those, especially on wildlife and birds. Most of the projects that have gone in have avoided the situations where we affect bird populations or wildlife populations in a significant way. And of course, critics of wind energy have always found the anomalies, the places where we have had problems, and there are some notable cases where we've learned how to do the siting and how not to do the siting, in fact. Well, I think Altamont was an example of an early wind installation where we didn't have any information about how to do the siting and what the potential impacts could be on the type of turbine that was installed and the type of impact those turbines could have on the local population. In that case, we had a problem with golden eagles, and I think that's one of the key lessons that the industry's learned. That happened over 20 years ago, and we're still using that example as a case study that we use to on how not to do siting.
Well, the windmills, as you can see, quite a few of them visible from here. There are thousands of them, I think, in the Altamont Hills. Built originally in the 80s. One of the objections is the bird kills. This area has got a lot of raptors. It's the largest population of breeding golden eagles, which are an endangered species. And so the concern about birds getting hit by the blades, and a lot of the wildlife groups are concerned about that, particularly with the high population of raptors in the area.
If environmental concerns can be met with careful wind farm siting and improved technology, what about the aesthetic concerns? Are wind farms a beautiful marvel of engineering or an eyesore? This has emerged as a major issue around the world.
When you hear people talking about wind farms, there are 100 issues that come up. My sense is that most of them would go away if the turbines were invisible.
In Cooperstown, New York, local residents opposed wind turbines for spoiling the beautiful views of an historic area. Thousands of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean, preservationists and environmentalists protested the proposed development of Europe's largest wind farm to be built on the islands off the coast of Scotland.
The Western Isles have Europe and the UK's greatest source of renewable energy. That has attracted a lot of developers to the area.
The issue in the Western Isles is wind farms.
Renewable energy is controversial. It provokes great and passionate debate amongst people.
The local authority have been working with these developers to bring this new industry to the area.
Now that would be a wind farm which would extend for 25 miles from one end of the island to another, be visible to the whole island and its whole community, and would involve 181 turbines, each the size of Big Ben in London.
But there's a clear difference between what people support in general and nationally, and when it comes into their own backyard, then it is different. It is, yes, I do support, and you'll often hear the phrase, I support wind energy, but this is not the place to put it.
The Outer Hebrides is a very traditional economy. Over the years it's been based on a mix of crofting, low-scale farming, fishing, aquaculture, tweed, etc. All these are industries that are waning for a number of different reasons.
We have not got over that problem that people need to be aware that they will see wind turbines, and eventually that will just be part of the local scenery and they will accept it.
The future of a proposed wind farm is never certain. In fact, opposition is often strong and passionate. Government and civic leaders in the Western Isles of Scotland are grappling with some of the issues common to wind power all over the globe. Sometimes concerns over what a wind farm might look like can escalate into a major controversy. Consider Nantucket's Cape Wind.
The organization is the Alliance to Save Nantucket Sound. It's funded by some of the wealthiest families in the history of the world who live in Osterville and Hyannisport. They've said that it will hurt fishing in Nantucket Sound, that it will kill birds, be a hazard to navigation, that it will interfere with radar. All of these things have been disproven through the regulatory process so far. Yet they are still saying those same things.
I mean, people were saying things like, you will be able to see these wind turbines from anywhere on Cape Cod, which of course is absolutely ridiculous. Anyone who paid attention to it knew that these things weren't true, but the average person who's just reading the newspaper, for better or for worse, tends to take for granted what they see in the newspapers.
Why are they so opposed to it? Because I'm convinced it's for aesthetic reasons.
Local residents opposed wind energy projects near population centres and scenic areas. For that reason, developers are locating wind farms in remote areas where they are not likely to encounter opposition and where a steady wind blows. Wind resources vary greatly throughout the world. The greatest land-based wind resources are in the United States Midwest, as well as in many areas of Europe, China and India. In densely populated Europe, where sites for land-based wind farms are limited, developers are building offshore wind farms in the North and Baltic Seas. The technology for offshore wind development drew from years of experience building derricks to drill for oil. The first of such wind farms were developed in Northern Europe.
We are now in Denmark. We are out offshore to visit the 72 wind turbines. And now we are up in the top of the turbine. Actually, it's 68 meters from the water. I'm sitting here in a generator, and that's you see that's fit the gearbox. The blades there are 44 meters long. It's quite big blades here.
Well, let me start by saying offshore wind is drawing from a significantly different resource. It's still a wind resource, but it's a wind resource that's located Instead of in the middle of the country, it's located off the coast of the country, and generally in an area where we have a strong gradient, where we go from a city, say, where 78% of the electricity is generated in coastal states, where the wind isn't very strong on land, to maybe 5 miles off, you get into very strong wind regimes where wind turbines are feasible.
You know, the wind resource off the coast are really excellent. First of all, there's a lot more wind, and what I mean by that is that the average wind speeds, that's probably the most important, the average wind speeds offshore are much higher on average than onshore. And the added advantage is not only are the average wind speeds higher, but they're for a longer prolonged period.
The question is, what does it take to get wind technology operating in those areas, and how far out do you need to go? And so this isn't simply taking a land-based machine and sticking it in the ocean. There has to be an evolution of the technology.
If you're developing a wind project offshore, you've got to deal with foundation issues that simply do not exist onshore. You're not operating in a moving environment when you're onshore. You're not dealing with sea level depths that you need to deal with offshore. You're not dealing with corrosion that you need to deal with offshore. So a lot of it is foundation design. You also have to develop turbines that are much more resistant to maintenance problems, because bringing a boat out, bringing a helicopter out to do maintenance on an offshore wind turbine is bound to be much more expensive than conducting maintenance onshore. And then there's cabling. You've got to bring the electricity that you're generating offshore to an onshore point, and that can be an extensive distance.